Good morning. This is a photo of a Chinese container ship at the port of Long Beach, California. All those shipping containers at the top are called TEUs, or 20-foot equivalent units. Container ships are getting ever bigger and able to transport almost unimaginable volumes of these TEU shipping containers. Halfway down this graphic, we see VLCs, or very large cargo ships, that would carry up to 15,000 of them. We're now at the ultra-large carriers with a capacity of over 20,000 shipping containers. And shippers and freight forwarders are very clever how to pack these things, so there's not much wasted space. Here's a peek inside palletized shipments from floor to ceiling. With this in mind, let's consider a new proposal that would charge high port fees for non-US built ships to use American ports. It's specifically targeting China, and the hope is that these measures would rebuild the United States production of civilian ships, which is basically non-existent anymore. Today, the global fleets of merchant shipping comes from 3 countries here in Asia. China, South Korea, and Japan are 90% of the market. And China is the biggest builder of all. 25 years ago, China was less than 5% of all the shipbuilding, and now they're over half. Chinese companies also own 19% of the world's fleet of commercial ships and 95% of all the shipping containers in the world. By comparison, the United States ranks 19th, building fewer than 5 ships a year, while China builds over 1,700. The first idea is to charge a $1 million fee when a Chinese-built or Chinese-owned ship enters a U.S. port. That sounds like a lot of money, and the announcement got some people in the shipping industry nervous. But let's look at these photos again. If one of those ships is hauling 20,000 TEU containers, $1 million divided by 20,000 is $50. $50 per container then. And that $50 would be spread out among all the buyers of everything in that container. Maybe just a few pennies for each bag or item in the shipping container, in other words. Or if it's a heavy tractor or something else that takes up the whole container, it's an extra $50. It's nothing, and nobody believes that that's going to move the needle at all. It's a math problem. There's not enough money there to compel new shipyard construction and the hiring of tens of thousands of people. There is more to these proposals than just the port entry fees, though. At least 1% of American products exported by sea would need to be on U.S. flagged and U.S. operated carriers, climbing to 15% after 7 years, with the eventual requirement that the ships be U.S. built. Now, this would be a huge problem, but not for importers. The problem would be for U.S. companies doing export business. And it's this part that has shipping experts and supply chain guys perplexed. It would make U.S. exports uncompetitive, starting the first day, because there simply aren't enough U.S. ships and crews in the whole world to handle American exports. Immediately upon enactment, ship operators would build what's called parallel fleets and set up distribution hubs offshore the U.S. to handle the volume. Unlike imports coming in, all this would be very expensive on a per-piece basis. For example, they might have ships that just zip back and forth between Bermuda and the U.S. East Coast for the U.S. crewed and U.S. built ships, then offloaded there and sent on their own international charters from Bermuda outbound, maybe. Pacific, hard to know how things would go there. Use a Mexican port maybe. Ensenada is going to be like Rotterdam, or Vancouver, Canada could be. But those shadow fleets and new port facilities in foreign countries would spring up right away and make the international seaports closest to Long Beach, LA, and New York and Savannah suddenly some of the busiest in the whole world. Obviously, this plan would dramatically drive up the cost of U.S. exports and the delivery times. It's worth a look to see how we got here and some of the facts on the ground. China now builds more commercial shipping than the rest of the world combined, and American companies aren't buying ships from China. In the past 8 years, China sold only a handful directly to the United States. U.S. companies don't own and operate fleets of commercial ships either. We outsourced that work a long time ago too. And it's also not the United States that builds them. Here's an ugly chart. Shipbuilding by tonnage. The United States barely shows up at all, and Japan and South Korea combined are less than China. The few American shipyards that we still have are doing contract work for the U.S. Navy. The Pentagon is a money, no object buyer, and the Defense Department seems to accept cost overruns and production delays as a matter of course in a way that private buyers of commercial ships would find completely unacceptable. The question I'm asking here is whether American shipyards could be competitive with shipbuilders elsewhere when they've grown fat and lazy off of defense contracts. Since 2010, shipbuilding workers in the U.S. has grown by another 25,000 or so, but all of that is due to military shipbuilding and repairs. Some analysts believe that these proposals are going to really benefit instead the Japanese and South Korean yards. We've got problems there too. Simply put, there aren't enough people. China has surplus for now, and that's why China's been able to grow its capacity to build everything, including ships. The United States cannot put another 1 million people to work building ships, even if we wanted to, let alone 5 million, and that's what is needed to take some of this business away from China. And the Japanese and Koreans couldn't do it either. In the beginning, again, these proposals seem like they would help U.S. shipbuilders who don't exist. And then the benefits might accrue to Japanese and Korean shipbuilding companies because it's just much more sensible to outsource ship production to them. A joint venture between a Korean yard and a U.S. one could paper over the ownership problem, for example. But that is already being tried, and the Koreans are already facing big problems because South Korea doesn't have enough skilled workers either. Hanwha and Hyundai, Korean companies, have U.S. Navy contracts for repair and maintenance, but they're already facing labor shortages in servicing those contracts. South Korea brings in workers from other countries to do the contract work, and local unions in Korea are objecting to that. That's Korea. Here's the problem with Japan from the U.S. perspective. Japanese shipbuilders have joint ventures with Chinese shipyards. This is the actual proposal from the administration, the U.S. Trade Representative. It begins with China's dominance in shipbuilding, then the proposal to charge up to $1 million for any Chinese vessel operator, or up to $1,000 per ton of capacity. Now that would make it very expensive. Suddenly now the entrance fee is $1,000 per ton times 280,000 tons is $280 million, which means those ships won't go to the U.S. at all until the ship operator gets a shell company outside China, then problem solved. It'll take some time to get the paperwork sorted, but that's what would happen on the import side. It's the rest of the proposal that's going to be such a serious problem, not to China and not to U.S. consumers or retailers, but to American exporters. U.S. labor unions and politicians who want their votes are being quoted here, who think it's great for them. But here are the experts. If you meet a guy named Lars Jensen, probably just assume that he knows everything about the ocean and anything that's floating on it. And Lloyd's List is one of the oldest newspapers in the world. It's very deeply respected. Lloyd's of London has been in the shipping and cargo insurance business for longer than the United States has been a country. And these are some of the people whose job it will be on the first day to build the shipping and logistics systems to get around these new rules for inbound trade. But Jensen and Lloyd's agree. U.S. exporters likely will not survive the shock of what their new shipping bills are going to be if their products have to go out on U.S. ships, because we don't have any ships. This is Chengde in Hebei. Be good.
Family to lead us the way, to show us to be better Christians, stronger believers, to encourage us and to love us. Give us good teachers. Give us strong ministers who remind us daily to lift up our leaders in prayer.